It's time for the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. The podcast you look forward to for all of your news and reviews of the best comic books hitting stands. Whether it's DC, Batman, Wonder Woman, Marvel, Spider-Man, Image, Spawn, Saga, Boom, Once and Future, Power Rangers, or whatever book or publisher you follow. We cover them all here. This is the place for you. That's right. It's for everyone. This is the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Let's get it.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I am, of course, your host, Theo. Have a quick episode for you all this week. I'll give a recap of my time at GalaxyCon New Orleans, which occurred last weekend. I have a couple of interviews for you as well. I had the opportunity to meet with Heather Antos, who is the group editor of the Star Trek titles over at IDW Publishing. I had the opportunity to talk to her. And then I also had the opportunity to sit down and talk with Mark Waid. And of course, you know, Mark Waid, writer over at DC, writing Justice League Unlimited, as well as Batman, Superman, World's Finest, and getting ready to release a new volume of Batman and Robin Year One. So I was able to speak with him at GalaxyCon as well. You can kind of hear it's a little raspy with my voice this week. And as you all remember from last episode, I mentioned some of the things that were going on with my 8-year-old feline Thanos and how he was sick. Well, unfortunately, as of this recording, Thanos has crossed the Rainbow Bridge and he passed away. So it's been pretty quiet and somber here for me. He was my partner in crime, and he was a fan of comics as well, so much so that he is the reason I invested in the black plastic comic bins that you see behind me instead of the traditional cardboard boxes, because he made it a point of getting into my bins and chewing on some comics. Fortunately, there weren't any expensive ones, but they were, they all fell to the wrath. So, he was a fan of comic books as well. But, he was my best friend. He was one of those cats who would sit and listen to me talk when I had stuff I had to bounce off, even if I was answering my own questions. He was a great partner in crime, and I'm gonna miss him. So say hello to Whisper and Chloe, who were my other two cats who passed prior to Thanos, but hope to see him again sometime in the future, just not too soon would be my hope. After the interviews, I'm not going to do a countdown of my top books for the week, but I will give you what was my favorite book for the week before closing out, and then give an idea of what's going to happen with the next episode. And of course, I'm doing this a few days before San Diego week. Of course, San Diego Comic-Con is next week, beginning on Thursday, with preview night on Wednesday. So I'll be talking a little bit about what I'll be doing out there in San Diego. But I will, as I said, kick things off with my recap of GalaxyCon New Orleans. It was their second year in the city, and it was actually far better than what it was last year. Again, it was the first year. They were in a smaller hall at the Morial Convention Center. This year, they were in halls I and J. Halls I and J, which at the far end of the convention center, but they are way bigger than the halls that it was in last year, which I believe was either C&D or D&E. But the layout was, again, far better than how it was last year. Just everything about it. The crowds were better with the exception of Friday. Friday is almost always a slow day, simply because during the summer there's still, where the convention center is in the business district. So getting to the convention center for a con that starts around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, while there are folks who are actually getting back and forth from either the convention center or other businesses in the area, can be a little tough. So it was a little bit slow on Friday, but for me that was expected. But Saturday and Sunday, especially Sunday was actually fuller than what I had expected. It was a good crowd. The worst day was Saturday, and that was only because of the weather. And when I say worst day, it's worse because of the weather, but the crowds were good on both Saturday and Sunday. I would assume that once GalaxyCon get the numbers, they'll see that they really outdid what they did in year one. And can't wait to see when things go on sale for year 3. I want to thank both Mark Rock and Greg Bear, who were my contacts at GalaxyCon and were able to help set things up for me, particularly with the Mark Waid interview. Considering how busy he is. He actually had a good Q&A panel that I was able to attend as well, that, talked about, just his background in coming into comics and, some of the things he enjoyed doing, not only at DC, but at other publishers as well. And, you'll see in my interview with him that, we talked a good bit about, Kingdom Come, which is, of course, my favorite alternate universe comic ever, and still is to this day. But yeah, it was a great weekend. I really enjoyed. This was far better. And, part of the reason it was way better is I won't say dragged, but I had my granddaughter with me, and you may have seen me post about it on social media, but this was the first con that she and I went to in a long time. The last time she attended one with me, it was a smaller one that was in the city, that was really, nowhere near the size of GalaxyCon. I mean, it was small enough to where all of the exhibitors were in one room. So that's how small it was. And so she had a blast. She and I spent the whole weekend together just hanging out either at the convention center or getting food or doing whatever. She just had a blast, and just seeing the enjoyment on her face, made the weekend even better for me, especially considering some of the things that I was going through with regards to Thanos being sick and all. So, and again, she enjoyed it just from the fact of getting out the house and avoiding and escaping the wrath of her baby brother. So that was also a joy for her. But yeah, I had a wonderful time and had a wonderful experience with her, which, I don't know how many of those I will have with her as she grows older. She's almost a teenager, and apparently it doesn't look good for teenagers to be hanging out with their boomer grandfather. So I will take every opportunity she gives me to hang out with her and do things with her, and yeah. Once she kicks me to the curb, I will have her little brother who will be around to aggravate me. But yeah, I really had a great time. I want to thank the folks at GalaxyCon for having me not only cover the show, but also for setting up those interviews for me. I wanted to meet with Dan Waters as well, but he and I couldn't connect. We talked a few times at his table, but every time that I went, either he had a little bit of a crowd or he was going to a panel. So, maybe I will have a chance to talk to him while in San Diego if he's there. I wasn't sure if he's on the DC schedule or not, but hopefully I'm able to talk to him soon. And if not, get him on the show, because I do want to have a conversation with him, not only about what he's doing at DC with Nightwing, but also the work he's doing over at Skybound Image, doing Mask, part of the Energon universe. So I will hope to get him on the show pretty soon, if not next week. But yeah, that's my quick recap of GalaxyCon New Orleans. I had a wonderful time. Again, want to thank those guys for having me cover the show, and look forward to doing it again next year when they come back. It's really a perfect time for them to be in the city, despite the weather, which can be a mixture of sweltering heat or flooding rain, depending upon how Mother Nature's feeling that day. But from a time perspective, it's a great time for them to be in the city, simply because it's in that period right after the Essence Music Festival, which happens the weekend of the 4th of July. And, pretty much nothing. There's usually nothing other than, some conventions that may be in town in July. There was actually a convention going on at the same time, which took part of, and now explains why GalaxyCon was at one end, because that other convention, which was a convention of school counselors, they were on the other end of the convention center. But all in all, it's a perfect time for GalaxyCon to be in the city, and get the crowds out there to the convention center. Again, Saturday and Sunday were absolutely great from a attendance perspective, at least from what I observed compared to what I observed last year. And yeah, I could just see them getting more and more entrenched with being in the city, much like Fan Expo did when they took over from Wizard World a few years ago. I think once they really get settled, we'll start seeing even more events or more top-notch guests attending GalaxyCon. The list of guests this year was far better than what we had last year. And again, that was expected, considering it was their first time in the city. So yeah, that's my recap for GalaxyCon New Orleans from this past weekend. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play the interviews that I did. First up, it'll be the interview I did with Heather Antos, the group editor over at IDW, on their Star Trek titles. And we talk a little bit about that after we talk just a few seconds about her time at Marvel, but we talk in depth about what she's doing at IDW with Star Trek and some of the titles that'll be coming out. They've already announced those titles, including the new Star Trek series that'll be coming out that will focus on Seven of Nine as the captain. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that. So here is my interview with comic book editor Heather Antos from GalaxyCon New Orleans, and I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you all on the other side. Hey, it's Theo. I am here at GalaxyCon New Orleans. They are here for their second year, and I am here. I finally have someone scratched off my bucket list. I am here with comic book creator, editor extraordinaire Heather Antos. Welcome back to New Orleans. You've been here a few times. How are you?
I'm good. I've partied too hard. I've lost my voice, so we're going to make the most of this.
New Orleans is known to do that to folks. So, quick question, and I'm going to hurry up and jump off of this. So, you've done some time at Marvel working on the Star Wars line, and particularly you're kind of credited as being a co-creator of Dr. Aphra. even though the fact that Lucasfilms is owned by Disney, how much work does it go into working with those guys at Lucasfilms, considering how big of an IP Star Wars is?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to working on IP that we're currently working with IDW on, like Star Trek or the Sanrio stuff at Hello Kitty, right? It's all funneled through their creative team as well. So we have our ideas, our plans, we pitch to them what we want to do. In the case of Dr. Aphra, we were doing the Darth Vader series with Karen Gillan, Salvatore LaRocca, and Karen needed Vader to have a sidekick in that series. He needed someone that he could, that could talk, because I don't know if you know, Darth Vader is a man of little words. Mm-hmm. So we needed someone that could do the fun espionage stuff behind the scenes. And so, we send our proposals, our ideas to Lucasfilm, and they tell us like, oh, that's really great. Instead of this character, can use that character, or maybe put it on this planet instead, or they help us fit it in with the larger picture of things that are going on. And that's similar again with like working on Star Trek right now at IDW.
So let's talk about Star Trek, because this is when I became a really huge fan of you and the work that you've been doing with those guys. In your role as a group editor, how do you juggle all of the different titles? Because it's while some may be in continuity, they're on the same storyline, but you also have Strange New Worlds and those miniseries, and then you have Lower Decks, which is in a world of its own. How do you juggle getting that work done as a group editor?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm planning out the entire line, the entire publishing plan of Star Trek, my goal is to make sure there is something in there for every Star Trek fan, or for as many Star Trek fans as possible. When I came onto the Star Trek line, a lot of the books tended to be strictly like the Next Generation focused, which is great. I love the Next Generation. It's what I grew up on as well. But, there's this breadth of just so many fascinating characters and eras of Star Trek that, it was really important to me to try and span the decades as much as we could. And so, that's a key thing we look at when we're looking at the stories is, have we been spending too much time in Deep Space Nine territory? Do we need to go back to the Kelvin universe for a bit? Like, what is going on over here in Lower Decks? And a lot of that, too, is dependent on what is going on behind the scenes in the larger picture of the Federation from Paramount's side. Are they currently developing stuff in the Discovery era with Starfleet Academy? Like, does that mean we can lean into that, or does that mean we have to stay away from that time until they figure out what they're doing? So it is a lot of maneuvering, but it's part of why I love the job.
Yeah, I remember when that one Strange New World miniseries came out, that it looked like it could easily fit the Illyrian. That just felt like a story that could have fit in between season 1 and season 2, because it was okay. Our number 1 is in trouble, and we need to figure out what's happening. And then we get this story about what the Vulcans did, and that was just awesome. I'm like, okay, now I would be all over the world if we actually come back from season 2 and they touch upon that, but apparently Paramount said, nope, you have your own story, we have ours.
Yeah, a lot of what we're always going to try and bridge the gap on the TV shows, but the TV shows, though there are people who work on that side that do work on the comics or pay attention to the comics, they have different mandates, right? And so a lot of times when I'm watching the shows, I like to see what gaps can we fill, what questions can we answer, how can we expand upon what the TV show is doing. But I would never expect a TV show to I have to stick to what happened in this panel in this comic book, as much as great as that would be, you know?
So as the Lore War started coming to an end, I was a little down because I'm like, okay, what's next for Star Trek? And now, for those fans of Picard, we're now getting Star Trek back, and now we're going to be focusing on a new aspect that came out of Picard, and that is with Seven as captain. How did that all come together?
Truthfully, I saw the outcry online like everyone else, right? I mean, Terry Matalas and the crew did such a great job ending season 3 of Picard, setting up the next generation, no pun intended, for the Enterprise and that crew. And, we saw what the fans wanted. We saw it out there. And look, it's not that Paramount didn't want to do the show, right? There's a ton of different things behind the scenes that are happening, were happening, that would prevent something like that to occur. A show like that would be so expensive for one, and, actor availability and all of this stuff, right? But, the request for this show and these stories didn't stop, right? And so eventually I asked Paramount, I was just like, are you guys doing anything with, are there plans to do anything in this era? Do you have Jerry signed on for anything? What is the territory? What is the sandbox right now? And they're like, no, we don't have anything concrete. And so I was like, can I do it? Would that be okay? And they're like, well, it depends on the pitch. And so I got together with Chris Cantwell, who, we did 3 years together on Star Trek Defiant. We did the Red Shirt series, which, really took off last year. And I was like, do you want to do Star Trek Legacy, the comic book? And he was all in, and here we are.
All right. Well, we got Red Shirts that's coming back as well. So what can fans expect from that? Because I will definitely tell you, I knew someone was going to die at the end. It's Red Shirts, for a reason.
Kind of the thing.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting that death to occur the way it did.
Sure.
So what can fans expect without spoiling what we're going to get in this new volume?
In this new volume, it's a very different tone. It's very different genre. I didn't want to play the same song twice, right? The first Red Shirts was kind of making us empathize with the Red Shirt and really oh shit, these are people too, right? They're not just a meme who dies in funny ways, and we care about the Red Shirts and how invested they are in the Federation mission. And so this volume is less of a war story like the first volume is, and it's more of an espionage thriller. If you're fans of 60s pulp novels or those spy movies, like your James Bond or your North by Northwest, or with a little bit of dark comedy, it is Red Shirts. And this book is for you. We're bringing on my old buddy Jerry Duggan, who we did the very famous Deadpool run together on. I took him over to the Federation, and I'm really, really excited for folks to check this one out.
All right, so speaking of using your power in the Federation, what was your reaction when, as things were coming to an end on Star Trek and with Defiant, to see that you've been elected president of the Federation?
It was an honor, a big responsibility that I didn't quite sign up for. No, that was a really, really sweet nod that Jackson, Colin, and Chris gave me. It was nice to I'm a part of this too. It was really sweet.
A name that lives on forever now in the pages of comics.
Yeah.
Heather Antos, thank you so much. So how can fans keep up with what you're doing? Because you're not only an editor at IDW, but you do a lot of consulting and freelance stuff as well.
Yep. The best way to get a hold of me is heatherantos.com, at Heather Antos on all of the things, or at a Comic-Con near you.
All right. Well, I will hopefully see you in San Diego as well. Heather Antos, thank you so much for joining me on the Comic Bin Podcast. Thank you so much. So I want to thank Heather for taking time out of her busy schedule while at GalaxyCon New Orleans to chat with me a little bit about what's going on at IDW with the Star Trek universe. The latest issue of Starfleet Academy, as well as the first issue of the second volume of Star Trek Red Shirts, will be out this coming week at comic shops everywhere. I've already read both of them. They were pretty good, especially Red Shirts. So if you followed volume 1, you know what that's about. It's pretty much a continuation, but as he mentioned in our chat, it's not along the same lines as that first volume. So take a look at it. Again, it's out on this coming Wednesday at comic shops everywhere. That's both the new Red Shirts volume as well as the latest issue of Starfleet Academy, Lost Contact. And of course the new Star Trek series, which will be focusing on Captain 7 of 9 and the Enterprise G will be out in September, on September the 23rd at comic shops everywhere. So, of course, you can get your pre-orders in for that. That poster that you saw her hold up during our chat, I want to thank her for giving me one as well. I have it hanging up on the wall over there next to my milestone poster. But thanks for that poster as well. So finally, I want to go ahead and play my interview with Mark Waid, also from GalaxyCon New Orleans. Again, this was about a 15-minute conversation that he and I had, and I really appreciate him taking the time to sit with me with his busy schedule, at the convention as well. So here is my chat with a comic book writer, comic book editor, comic book extraordinaire, Mark Waid, and we talk about a bunch of stuff, including my love for Kingdom Come and some of the other stuff that he had worked on, is working on, and just the comic book industry as a whole. So here's my interview with Mark Waid. I hope you all enjoy it. Hey, it's Theo. I am here still at GalaxyCon New Orleans, and I am here with the great Mark Waid. Mark, it's been a while since you've been in New Orleans. How's your trip back to the Crescent City been?
It's been terrific. I mean, we came in a few days early. We have not had a bad meal. We have had a great experience. We managed to stay out of the rain somehow, but it's been terrific.
So this year, of all years, to be in New Orleans, marks 30 years of Kingdom Come.
Yes.
How has that been? I am on record, no matter where you go, I am on record with Kingdom Come being my all-time favorite AU title.
Thank you.
And it hasn't been close.
Yeah.
Probably the closest would be Gotham by Gaslight, but it's miles away.
Yeah.
So and I also backed the campaign on Kickstarter for Kingdom Come. How is that experience when you think about it? When I first read Kingdom Come back in '96, I'm, a little bit in college.
Right.
So I'm just learning to read comic books critically, whereas before I was reading it as a fan.
Right.
And Kingdom Come obviously was a critical story, when looking at the world of superhero comics as it was back then.
Right.
How do you think why does it still resonate with fans today?
I wish I knew. If I knew that, I would write more of them. If I would write more stuff like that. A huge part of it, obviously, is Alex's work. Obviously, the painted work that Alex did is just spectacular. It looks great. And look, I have no false sense of pride about this. If that story had been written by me and drawn by an average artist, that I don't think anybody would be talking about it today. But there's just something about the way Alex and I were able to come together and talk about things with superheroes that are a little more sophisticated than most standard comics. I mean, you tell me, why do you think it holds up? I have no idea.
Well, again, yes, and absolutely. I'm not going to say I did not love the art. I absolutely love the art. Alex Ross is an artist of his own.
Yeah.
But again, reading it as a fan as compared to reading it critically, when you start to think about, how things were with superhero comics, in the late 90s, and we got into the 2000s. And things were a little different.
Yeah.
And it seemed like Kingdom Come was a letter to say, hey, let's kind of get back to the basics.
Yeah.
Which is what I wanted as a fan.
Right.
I've been collecting comic books since I was 9 years old. So you see how the genre changed. And as an old timer, you kind of want that brought back.
Yeah.
And that's how it felt for me.
Yeah, really. I mean, Alex and I both are big fans of just going back to basics.
Yeah.
Go back to square one and look at these characters and figure out where they came from originally and what their original concept was, and try to build off of that rather than look, there's room for interpretation, but at the heart of it, Alex and I want to be true to the characters as they were and take that sort of Hippocratic oath of do no harm. Mm-hmm. It's like, just let the characters be the characters, and there's no need for us to put so much of ourselves into it that they don't feel like It's not ego. I mean, that's ego if you do that. If you think, oh, I'm better than the characters, I'm smarter than the characters, or my ideas are more clever than the guy who originally came up with the character, well, that's just ego, and that's not right. You want the characters to feel like they are, you know.
How was the feedback from your colleagues when the story first came out? Considering it was a critique, more or less.
It was very positive. I mean, we had no idea. Alex had some idea because he had Marvels before that, so he had some idea of how it would be received, but I didn't know. I mean, and I wrote the first 3 issues before the first one went on sale. And then I sat down to the 4th one after the first issue had come out, and I was paralyzed. I had flop sweat all of a sudden, right? Because I had no idea it would be received that hugely. And we managed to make something where, I managed to put my nose to the grindstone enough to finish the issue, but I had no idea that it would be something we would still be talking about 30 years later.
And since your return to DC, you were able to bring the Kingdom Come universe into continuity in World's Finest.
Yeah.
How did that come together? How do you plan that out?
Here's what happened. So after Kingdom Come came out, obviously DC was looking they came to us and said, do it again. And it's like, I don't want to do that again. But do you have any ideas, they said, for something that is kind of a sequel? And Alex and I sat down, and what happened was Alex and I just had much different ideas about what the next thing should be. And he was more cosmic and new gods and stuff like that. And I like the personal stuff a little bit more. And neither is right, neither is wrong, but we both, amicably said, you go do your thing, I'll go do my thing. It was not a breakup. It was just like, we both have a different path we want to follow.
Yeah, different stories.
Yeah. So I had come up with the Boy Thunder story that was going to be the sequel to Kingdom Come. So I wrote that in like 1998, or at least parts of it. I came up with the Boy Thunder character and the whole Superman sidekick thing. So I've had that bullet in the chamber for 25 years. And when I got a chance to do World's Finest, I was going through some old stuff, and I'm like, hey, that idea still works because it's been 25 years and nobody has ever done anything like it. So that opened up that door, and that was the big surprise with Boy Thunder, is that he was connected to the Kingdom Come universe. And then we did the sequel with Alex's blessing, which I wouldn't have done any of this stuff without calling Alex first, just to see how he felt about it. And it's worked out really well for us. And Dan Mora, come on. Dan Mora's drawn World's Finest at that time, and it's just, he made it all sing.
Give him all the books. Just give him all the books.
If Dan could draw everything, that would be awesome. Dan's amazing.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. So let's stick a little bit with World's Finest. I remember when first reading it, World's Finest has this tendency of going back and forth in time.
Yeah.
With some of its arcs. How do you strike that balance of knowing when you wanted to do those time changes?
Well, I mean, DC did come to me first and say, we want a Superman-Batman team-up book, but we want the classic versions of the characters. Because at that time, when I took over World's Finest, in continuity, Superman was on War World for a year, and Batman had lost his fortune, and I didn't know, there was no way to do a team-up book like that time. So they said, just go back a few years in time. It's still in continuity, but just go a few years back in time, and that gives you the liberty to do kind of whatever you want to do. And so they knew, my editor, Paul Kaminsky, knew that I could be counted on to do the book in a classic sense and a classic feel, but not make it seem like a nostalgia act, right? Because that's the balance I have to strike all the time, is I want it to be evocative of the things I loved growing up in comics, but it still has to feel modern, or else it is a nostalgia act, and it's just, then I'm just redoing the Silver Age, and who cares,
So sticking with continuity,
yeah.
Again, me being the old timer, collecting since I was a little boy. The statement today by most creators is, what's continuity, what's canon, with whatever's written on the page.
Right.
And for me being an old timer who has been reading for years, where I will always refer back to, well, this was Damian's first appearance.
Oh yeah.
How did, and I can go back further to Mike Barr's, Son of the Demon story. How do you suggest folks like me to to come to some type of, well, what's the word I'm looking for? Reconciliation,
Right.
to understand that the idea of continuity doesn't really matter as much as it may have been 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, there's two schools of thought, right? One is that consistency is more important than continuity. That in the same way The Simpsons has no real continuity, Homer's had a million jobs. But it's still consistent. Like the characters still from episode to episode feel like those characters. And you're not doing anything so crazy that it doesn't feel like it belongs in that world. And so there's that school of thought. I tend to lean more into the continuity of it. Having to do that new History of the DC Universe book, that was me just cutting loose with here's everything I know about the DC Universe. And we had some talks about some stuff. Like there were points in continuity with like Hawkman or Supergirl where we really had to sit down and butt heads and like come up with a compromise solution to make sure that it's still, what's the continuity of that now? But DC's really good about just kind of trying to make it feel like everything happened. If you can make that work and not violate stuff, that's the Grant Morrison approach, right? Everything happened somehow. And I like that approach.
So speaking of new history of the DC universe, we recently had a spinoff with the Dakota incident.
Yeah.
How did you get approached with regards to making that story come to life?
They did all the heavy lifting. All I was really there to do was to make sure that it fit within the overall DC continuity. Because I love the Milestone universe and I love what those guys do, but that's not my story to tell. It is their story to tell. So I was really kind of there just to advise and, give insight as to, here's some continuity you might have overlooked, or here's a place in continuity this might have happened or whatever. So I just, any credit I have on that book is overstated.
Do you think it's important for Milestone to be within the main DC universe?
I think, tragically, it kind of is, because that, with the exception of the Absolute books, which is a whole different thing, I think that fans have this attitude, and I was kind of this way too, of feeling like if it's not happening in the main universe, it doesn't count per se, and so it's easier to ignore. And so that's to put something like the Milestone universe completely outside the DC universe there's good reasons for that, but it's also easy for readers to decide it doesn't count, which is ridiculous. But I get it. That's why that's why we keep being adamant the World's Finest is in continuity. Because if it wasn't in continuity, it would be really easy for fans to go, it's just kind of an over there thing. I don't have to really pay attention.
So on the other side of what you're doing, working on Justice League Unlimited.
Yeah.
I would think with a story like that, because you're touching everybody.
Yeah.
That it takes a lot of communication with your colleagues who may be doing something else.
Yep.
How often are you having communication with folks about, okay, here's where I'm going to JLU. What are you working on?
Pretty often. I mean, Tony Fleece and I just sat down yesterday to talk about some of the characters that he's wanting to use in Deathstroke, that, making sure that we're on the same page. But what I really appreciate about what's happening at DC now in general is that I've been there for like 40 years, right? And I've never seen the editorial team more in sync and talking to each other and communicating with each other as I have now. I've never seen the creative community around working in DC so communicative with each other. So we really are, for the first time in a long, long time, it feels like there's not fiefdoms. It feels like we're all pulling in the same direction. We are encouraged to communicate to make sure that, if Mr. Terrific is off in space in Justice League, you're not using him in Captain Atom at the same time or whatever,
Yeah. Okay. So I do have one last question for you. And and thanks for the question that everybody wants to know. Yeah. What did Jonathan and Martha do to you that you want them out?
How did Jonathan and Martha hurt me? I know Josh Williamson called me up and said, "Is that okay?" I said, "Oh, that's great. I'm totally fine with that gag." Of Superboy Prime saying to Jonathan and Martha Kent, Mark Waid wants to see you dead. I'm so glad you're alive. Mark Waid wants you dead. Here's the thing. Look, I wouldn't kill them off as characters now because for 40 years, right? They've been 50 years almost. God, 50,
They've been back in one way or another.
For a long time, longer than they were dead almost. So most fans know it that way. I always thought that it served an important purpose for those characters to not have survived into Superman's manhood because, like, again, in like the Christopher Reeve movie or in a lot of other interpretations of Superman, this is how you learn that you can't fix everything, that there are certain things out of your control. And there is something about, and this is personal, this is not, I'm not saying this is the way it should be, I'm saying that this is how I personally feel. It is hard for me to reconcile Superman going back home for advice with Ma and Pa and sitting there having pie and asking them for advice and stuff when he's Superman, he's not a kid anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, like it's cool to have a great relationship with your parents, but you're still an independent human being. And also there's something about, on top of this, I think an element of Superman that I tend to zone in on that other writers don't necessarily or don't even necessarily feel this way, but I do. I think there's something about the loneliness of Superman that is important and makes him part of who he is. That there's Supergirl, but that she came later. You know, there's not many people who get who he is or that he can really relax around and confide in and be himself. And there's not many people he can relate to on a level of, there's other superheroes, but how many of them can, destroy a city by sneezing hard or whatever, that is an aloneness to him. That I think is important. And so to have Mom Podcan around to just chat with, it takes away that loneliness somehow. Again, if you're a big fan of them being alive, totally cool. I would never change it because it's the same with the marriage. In my mind, it's hard for me to reconcile that Superman and Lois are married. It's hard for me to figure out how that works in my head, but I would not change it because everybody who's reading comics now grew up with it that way. So why change it?
Yeah. And I know I said it was my last question, but you mentioned something that I do want to touch on.
Yeah.
With regards to Clark's loneliness and, being able to go to Ma and Pa.
Yeah.
Is that part of the reason? Because we see in action right now, your focus has been on Superboy instead of Superman.
Yeah.
Is that part of the reason that you want to kind of focus on Clark as a youngster now?
Because the purpose of putting Superboy back in continuity, the idea that Superman had a career as a teenager, is that you don't get to see Superman make mistakes. You don't get to tell stories of how Superman learns how to become Superman, because by the time he becomes Superman, I kind of want him fully formed at that point. Mm-hmm. And B, within the DC universe and within the character, you can't afford to make mistakes as Superman. By the time you become Superman, you need the whole world to trust you at all times.
You need to be a veteran.
You need to be a veteran. You need to get it right every time, because Superman can make mistakes, but you can't make them on a very public stage because that's when people stop trusting you, right? So Superboy allows us to do Jonathan and Martha and him learning the lessons that he has to learn as Superman, learning about right and wrong and learning about, I have a scene where it looks like Ma and Pa Ken are going to lose the farm. And Superboy says, well, I can fix that. I can just dig up some gold. Yeah. And here's a gold ingot and it solves the problem. And Pa Ken's like, that's not right. That could work, but that's not a solution because you can't do that every time. That's not going to fix everything every time. And also, as Superboy, we don't know whether your powers are going to last forever. They could go away tomorrow. We have no idea. So you can't learn to rely on your superpowers to solve your problems because they may not always be there.
Mark Waid, this has been a wonderful experience. Thank you so much. How can fans keep up with what you're doing right now?
I am at Mark Waid Writer at Instagram. If you are over 60, I'm on Facebook. And that's where you can find me. And so, keep up.
Mark Waid, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So again, I want to thank Mark Waid for taking time out of his schedule to sit with me while at GalaxyCon New Orleans. It was an enjoyable conversation. It probably could have gone on longer if we didn't have time constraints. And I want to especially thank him for the time he took just talking with my granddaughter. That was almost as long as the conversation he and I had. I wish I really could have recorded it just from my own personal experience. It was a really wonderful interaction between the two of them. But again, thanks to Mark Waid for taking the time out to sit with me. And again, thanks to the folks over at GalaxyCon for making that happen, particularly Mark Rock, who apparently I've known for quite a while. I've always known him by face and never by name. But want to thank him for everything that weekend as well with getting interviews and all set up for me. But that's it as far as my interviews and my recap with GalaxyCon New Orleans. Again, I hope I'm able to get Dan Waters on the show really soon, since I wasn't able to chat with him at the convention. But before closing out, again, I'm not going to do a full countdown, but there were a lot of good things that were out this week, whether it was the last issue of Tigress Island, whether it was Murder Podcast, whether it was the latest issue of X-Men or Absolute Green Arrow. I'm really enjoying that series. But for me, my favorite title this week, and it was really a toss-up between this one and the first issue of the new volume of Dark Knights of Steel. But for me, my number one book for this week is Superman Unlimited number 15 from writer Dan Slott and artist Lucas Meyer over at DC Comics. I want to first give a major shout out to Torrin Clark for the cover that he did for this issue. It is absolutely beautiful in this depiction of Damian and what we knew and who we now know as Ultra Boy. It wasn't actually Superboy going at it, and just as they're going at it on this cover, they went at it in this issue as Damian armed himself up not only with armor but armed himself with blue kryptonite, which for the Kryptonian beings of Earth 3 weakens them in the same sense that green kryptonite does on Earth 1 or Earth 0. But it was a really good issue in seeing those two come to battle and come to blows, but also in John Kent, aka Tomorrow Man, being able to get Ultra Boy to realize, he doesn't have to follow in his dad's footsteps. He doesn't have to be like Ultraman. He's a hero. He could be a hero, and in the end, that's what he ended up doing. He ended up saving Smallville from the weaponized kryptonite that came from El Qadera. And I'm really interested to see where things go now, because we all know that this is going to lead into Kingdom of Zod, and we kind of see that as we get to the epilogue of this issue, where we see things set up, and we see that Zod has been here for quite a while already. So we're going to be going into this Kingdom of Zod sooner rather than later. And I spoke about it last week as well when I was speaking about Supergirl, the issue of Supergirl that spoke about, that issue finishing up with what they were doing for the Reign of Superboys, and this being the last issue of Reign of Superboys in Superman Unlimited as well. But it was a really good issue that leads into what's going to be happening in Kingdom of Zod. I enjoyed the writing. I kind of figured from the start that it wasn't going to be the real John Kent. It's not possible for the two to coexist at the same time. And the way that Slott ended the story with Superwoman from Earth 3 coming and taking Ultra Boy with her, and John promising to find him, will of course lead to more stories down the line. How soon that will be, only you and I can guess, but at least it's out there, and will hopefully happen soon. But yeah, that was my number one book for this week. Superman Unlimited, number 15, from writer Dan Slott, with art from Lucas Meyer over at DC Comics. So that is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I want to thank you all for joining in. Again, I apologize for the raspy voice, but it's been a trying 2 weeks, and especially the last few days with the loss of Thanos. So thank you all for your patience as I get myself back together. But next time I'll be reporting in from San Diego. It's Comic-Con week, and I'll be heading out to San Diego. I'm going to miss out on preview night, but I will be reporting in beginning on Thursday. I already have several interviews lined up, as well as some panels that I'll be heading out to. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get to them all, considering some of the interviews that I got lined up, and so I'll be putting those out on YouTube as well as I do them. But again, I want to thank you all for your support. I will see you all next time as I report in from Comic-Con International out in San Diego, California at the San Diego Convention Center. But again, thank you all for your support, and until I see you all again, you all be safe out there and keep reading those comics. That is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support of the program. The Comic Bin Podcast, as well as the Comic Book Spot, are a part of the Comic Book Source family of sites and media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter X at comic_bin, or my personal account at BatmanFan_4life. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. We're all over social media. You can also follow our sister site over at thebatmanuniverse.net for all of your news and reviews in the world of Batman. Tune in next time as we give you more in the world of comic books. Again, we truly appreciate your support. But until we meet again next time, keep reading those comics.